Hey, welcome back to EMP Cycle Works. Today we're working on a 2019 GSXR 750. Pretty quick job. We're just going to replace the stator cover on the other side. This bike was dropped and we're going to get it roadworthy. I'm going to start with breaking loose all the bolts holding the stator cover on. This is where it was dropped. There's a little crack here. And don't forget about this oil gallery plug to break that loose. And then I'm just going to zip off the starter cover here and use my pry bar just to crack it loose. It's O-ring holding it in there and it's kind of hard to get at. And don't lose the washer, the shaft. Inside here there is a bearing and the idler gear. Now under that cover there is a little 8mm bolt that we need to remove as well, and then there's don't forget about the washer that goes on the inside of that idler gear. So there's two washers, a bearing and the shaft, and then just take apart the rest of the bolts. Now if you don't know, these side covers here are just held on with a little pin and some Velcro, so you just need to get underneath it and pop it off. It's kind of scary at first, but once you know how to do it, it's easy. Doing all this just so I can raise up the tank to unplug the stator. And a little secret trick that I use is stick a little 2x4 underneath the bottom of it there, and that'll prop it up and keep it out of the way. A lot of these models come with a tank prop that's underneath the rear cowling. I just didn't even look for it. This is just my go-to way. And then here I am disconnecting the plug, getting it out of the way. And then I'll use the rag. I use a microfiber rag on my pry bar just to protect any surfaces that I might be prying against. I'm not using a whole lot of force here, just enough to get it past the dowel pins and break the gasket. And here with a flathead screwdriver, getting the starter O-ring to release. And it's just being very careful. I don't want to damage anything other than the stator cover. That's already damaged, so I'm not too concerned about that. And once that comes out, there's another idler gear under here with another shaft that we want to make sure we account for. And then any dowel pins that are still attached to this cover we need to get out. Now we break loose the stator bolts. So there's 3 stator bolts and then a bolt that holds a little plate that keeps the wires away from the magnet, the rotating magnet. Zip them out. And then carefully release the little grommet there, and there's that little plate that I was talking about. Now we got our new cover, so we want to spray this off with brake cleaner and clean out the holes, make sure there's no machining residue left in there, and there's an oil passage as well. So I want to make sure I blow that off, make sure there's no debris in there. Right there, you see it. Now these bolts need to be really clean, free of oil. They're going to get some blue Loctite. These bolts are pretty critical. They're going to be torqued and Loctited down so they don't come loose. Now we locate the stator and clock it so the bolt holes line up, and install the grommet into the case. And then here's the blue Loctite. You don't got to go crazy. Just, you know, drop is good. Install the plate that holds the wire away from the rotor, the charging rotor, and then everything gets torqued down. So the stator bolts get torqued to 87 inch-pounds, and then I do 60 on the bracket that holds the wire back, the retaining bracket. Very important that these get torqued properly. You don't want to over torque them. And the Loctite is very important as well. If these back out, you could have some pretty serious damage. Now I'm going to use my maroon Scotch-Brite, which I'm a big fan of, to clean the gasket surface. We don't want any leaks here, so we don't want to do it again. And then I'm going to take my microfiber rag with some brake cleaner and just clean any oil that may have seeped onto there. And then I'm going to use this Maxima waterproof grease on these O-ring for the starter. Now this is the brake cleaner that I prefer. It's from Advanced Auto Parts. It's just their regular like house brand Weaver brake cleaner. Works really well, and it doesn't seem to bother my my skin. I know I should be wearing gloves, but so we get the idler gear in with the pin, and then make sure the dowel pins go on with a brand new gasket. Now we want to use some engine case sealant on where the two case halves come together. There's two seams on this gasket surface here. I use 3-Bond 1211, works great. Similar to Yamabond, it's just not as stringy. And then you also want to put it on the grommet here on the cover, just on the outside of it. Just ensure that you don't have any leaks. So we put our new gasket on, making sure to line up the dowels, and the gasket sealant there will help it stay in place. And then we need to get the dowel pins located on the cover, as well as the starter. So usually it takes a little tap, you know, nothing crazy. You just want to make sure it goes in, but you don't want to use the bolts to draw it in though. If it's not in place before the bolts go in, then you need to really double check and make sure and get it in there right. So blue Loctite on these bolts as well, and these are torqued to the same as the Stator bolts, like 87 inch-pounds. Pretty much most 6mm fasteners on any of these bikes are about 87 inch-pounds. It's pretty standard torque spec. And then this is that oil gallery plug that I broke loose at the beginning. Make sure I put that installed. If you don't install this, it'll squirt oil out as soon as you start it. It'll be a big mess. And then we got our idler gear pin and then the washer, and then I'll put the bearing on, and you can spin the starter clutch to get this gear index into the starter clutch and the starter. So I usually stick it in, and then you can spin it if it's close, and it'll you know, jump into place there. And then the last washer goes on, and then same thing. If you don't have a new O-ring, waterproof grease works really well on these O-rings to seal them up. And then once you have the holes lined up, just give it a little tap. Again, blue Loctite on these bolts. And same thing, torqued to 87 inch-pounds. I'm going to use some dielectric grease on the electrical connector here. These connectors are prone to melting and burning up, so the dielectric grease will just help maintain a solid connection there. And it's really hard with big hands to get in there and plug these things in. And then take my 2x4 out and lower the tank. Now I can bolt everything up. So I'm just cleaning off my greasy fingerprints off of the brand new cover, making sure everything is good, and start it up. Alright, no leaks, everything looks good. One thing I forgot to mention is if it's standing upright like this, you don't have to empty the oil, because the oil level is actually below this. So no need to do an oil change. This bike has less than 200 miles in this oil change, so we're good there. So last thing, man, if you like the video, like, comment, and subscribe. And thanks for watching, and I will see you later.